When I was 17, I went off to college and wasn't really prepared for all of it. I didn't have a car and was very introverted. Worst of all, I had very little financial aid left after paying my tuition. So I felt very lucky finding a friend almost immediately. He was a year older with some college experience, and he was rich, so he would buy me food when we went out. One time he invited me to go with him as his date to a charity event that the mayor was hosting. But almost immediately after arriving, my friend ditched me to go flirt up some older ladies. I decided to go off and find my own fun. The event was taking place in this immense mansion, so there were many empty halls and rooms to explore. The sound of the party got further away as I made my way towards corridors covered in unusual art. It was getting dark outside. I could see by the skyline windows, but this side of the house was oddly illuminated by only candles. I hadn't seen another guest in over an hour, so I felt safe going into the vacant rooms, and I guess kind of rummaging through personal belongings. I found some odd-looking books that were written in symbols that I couldn't understand. I secretly wanted to take one, and was in the process of shoving it under my clothes when I heard a voice down the hall. It wasn't coming from the direction of the gala, but in the opposite direction, from one of the rooms that I hadn't gone into. There was an amber light pouring from that room, so I could guess they had a fireplace in there. I creeped along the hall till I was almost in front of the open door. I stood quietly listening. I could hear 3 male voices talking in the room. I went slowly to my knees and leaned closer. Now I had a better vantage and could see 2 older men and 1 younger. The older men were having a heated discussion about returning home. It was hard to hear all of what they were saying, but it seemed that the younger man was afraid and was keeping his distance. Suddenly, the oldest of the men stomped over to the younger man and grabbed his arm, yanking him to a standing position. Then he said, "You will do as you are told, Key. We must return now." The old man then dragged the young man to a long, oval-shaped mirror that I hadn't noticed before. The other old man walked to the mirror too. They all stood in front of it. The oldest man then said, "Key, open the door now." The mirror looked as if it was shimmering for a split second, then stopped. The reflection of the 3 men then changed. Their faces were not human. The best way I've been able to describe them was something like a draconian. It was like human, but with a short snout, scales, and sharp teeth. Their eyebrows were ridged, like lizards. As I watched in shock and horror, they walked into the mirror. I sat back on my heels and realized I had stopped breathing. I was probably there only seconds, dwelling in my fear. Then I stood up and ran. I just kept on running till I got the park that was adjacent to my dorms. I've only told 1 other person, my therapist, when I was around 32. She didn't believe me. I don't even know what I saw, but I have had nothing but time to recall the memory over and over again. I freak my own self out, wondering if they saw me. If they did, I hope they don't return to punish me. The wind howled through the barren trees, its mournful wail echoing the desolation that hung heavy in the air. I stood at the edge of the ancient cemetery, my heart pounding in my chest like a frantic drum. The night was impossibly dark, shrouding everything in an inky blackness that seemed to swallow the very moonlight. It was a night made for ghosts and ghouls, and I was about to discover just how true that was. My name is Sarah, and I had recently inherited Hollowbrook Manor, a sprawling, decaying mansion nestled deep within the heart of the woods. The moment I stepped foot on the property, I felt a chill crawl up my spine, as though the very earth beneath me was cursed. The locals whispered of a dark history, of restless spirits and a terrible tragedy that had befallen the family that once lived there. But I dismissed these tales as mere superstition, the product of small-town minds. As I explored the manor, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The walls seemed to whisper secrets, and shadows danced in the corners of my vision. Despite my rational mind's attempts to quell my fears, I couldn't escape the growing sense of unease that settled like a stone in my stomach. One night, unable to sleep, I decided to investigate the source of the haunting sounds that had plagued my nights since my arrival. Armed with a flickering candle, I ventured into the mansion's labyrinthine corridors, each step echoing eerily in the silence. The air grew colder with every passing moment, and I could feel unseen eyes upon me. I entered the grand ballroom, a once majestic space now crumbling into decay. The candlelight flickered, casting grotesque dancing shadows on the peeling wallpaper. And then I heard it, a soft, melodic whisper that sent shivers down my spine. "Get out," it breathed, a spectral voice barely louder than the wind. I spun around, my eyes wide with terror, but there was no one there, only the oppressive darkness and the chilling echo of that haunting command. Ignoring the warning, I pressed on, determined to uncover the truth. As I delved deeper into the manor's history, I discovered the tragic tale of the family that had lived there generations ago. A tale of forbidden love, betrayal, and a vengeful spirit seeking retribution. I thought I could put the spirit to rest, lay the past to peace, but I was gravely mistaken. One fateful night, as a storm raged outside, I found myself inexplicably drawn to the attic, a place I had avoided until then. The air was thick with an otherworldly energy, and I felt a presence palpable and suffocating. The room was filled with an assortment of dusty, forgotten belongings, but my attention was drawn to an old, ornate mirror standing in a shadowy corner. As I approached, my reflection flickered, distorting into something monstrous and grotesque. I stumbled back in horror, my heart racing, but an unseen force held me in place. The room seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy, and the whispering grew louder, filling my ears like a cacophony of tormented souls. In the mirror, I saw the face of the vengeful spirit, a young woman, her eyes hollow and black, her once beautiful features twisted with rage. She spoke, her voice a chorus of anguished cries. "You should never have come here," she hissed, her voice echoing with the pain of centuries. "Now you will share in our suffering." I screamed, my cry of terror joining the chorus of voices that filled the room. The mirror shattered and darkness consumed me. When I woke, I was no longer in the attic. I was somewhere else entirely, a place of eternal darkness, where the cries of the lost reverberated through the void. I was trapped, caught between worlds, my soul ensnared by the vengeful spirit that had haunted Hollowbrook Manor for centuries. And so, I became a part of the haunting, my voice joining the chorus of warnings that echoed through the halls of the accursed mansion. "Beware all who enter here, for the spirits that dwell within are not at rest. They hunger for revenge, and they will stop at nothing to claim your soul, just as they claimed mine. This is my fate, my eternal torment, and now I pass on this warning to you, dear reader. If you ever find yourself near Hollowbrook Manor on a dark and stormy night, heed my words and stay far away, lest you too become a part of the haunting, lost forever in the shadowy depths of the cursed mansion." The night was thick with an eerie silence as I made my way through the deserted alleyways of the city. The streetlights flickered, casting long, distorted shadows that seemed to dance in the darkness. I could feel eyes on me, an unshakable sense of being watched. My heart hammered in my chest, a rhythmic drumbeat that matched my quickened footsteps. I knew I was being followed, hunted even, by something that lurked in the shadows, something far more sinister than any human predator. My name is Alex, and I had always scoffed at the idea of supernatural creatures, dismissing them as mere figments of imagination. But on that night, my skepticism was shattered like glass under a sledgehammer. I had unwittingly stumbled into a world where nightmares bled into reality, where vampires were not the stuff of legend, but chillingly real entities that roamed the night. It started innocently enough. A late-night walk turned into a nightmare when I heard a soft, melodic voice whisper my name on the wind.
"Alex."
I turned, expecting to see a familiar face,
"Alex."
but there was no one there. Just the empty street, the echo of the voice lingering like a ghostly caress. Fear clawed at my throat, but I dismissed it as my imagination playing tricks on me. But then I saw them, a pair of eyes gleaming like polished onyx in the darkness. They belonged to a figure cloaked in shadows, a silhouette that moved with an unnatural grace. My rational mind screamed at me to run, to flee from the danger that emanated from this mysterious stranger, but my feet remained rooted to the spot, as if bound by an invisible force. The figure stepped into the dim light, revealing sharp, predatory features and fangs that glinted like polished daggers. I gasped, my breath catching in my throat. Vampires, I thought in disbelief. Real vampires. The stories of their mesmerizing allure and insatiable thirst for blood were no longer the products of fiction, but a chilling reality that stood before me. Before I could react, the vampire lunged, moving impossibly fast. I felt a searing pain as fangs sank into my neck, hot blood spilling like liquid fire. I cried out, a mixture of terror and agony, as the vampire fed, draining my life force with each stolen drop. The world blurred, my vision fading into darkness. When I awoke, I was no longer in the alley. I was in a dimly lit chamber, surrounded by ornate tapestries and antique furniture. The vampire stood before me, his eyes now a deep, crimson red, his face smeared with my blood. He grinned, revealing those sharp fangs, and I knew with bone-chilling certainty that I was now one of them, a creature of the night, cursed to roam in search of the crimson embrace that would sustain my undead existence. Days turned into nights, and I learned the ways of the vampire under the tutelage of my sire, the one who had turned me. I discovered the intoxicating power of my newfound abilities, the strength to crush bones like twigs, the speed to blur into a mere shadow, and the hypnotic allure that could ensnare even the strongest-willed prey. But with these gifts came an insatiable hunger, a burning thirst for blood that could not be quenched. We hunted together, prowling the city like phantoms, preying on the unsuspecting souls who ventured out after dark. The taste of blood was both exquisite and tormenting, a reminder of the humanity I had lost. I saw the fear in our victims' eyes, the realization that they were facing something beyond the realm of their understanding. It sent shivers down my spine, a cold, creeping horror that whispered of the monstrous path I had been forced onto. But amidst the bloodlust and the darkness, a glimmer of my former self remained, a flicker of guilt and remorse that clawed at the edges of my consciousness. I was no longer the person I once was, no longer bound by the moral compass that had guided my actions. I was a predator, a creature of the night, and there was no going back. And so I roam the shadows, haunted by the memory of my humanity, forever entangled in the crimson embrace that both sustains me and damns me. Beware, for in the darkest corners of the world, vampires exist, lurking in the night, waiting for their next victim, their next taste of the crimson life force that keeps them undead and eternally cursed.